Hello everyone, this is John from Vulgar Kitten Studios, and welcome to part 2 of our third-person shooter controller series. In this tutorial, we're just going to be doing some basic constant setup, or I suppose you could say global setup. If you go into your scripts folder, you will find a C# script called globals. Now if you've seen my previous third-person controller tutorial, this I actually called helper, but this script is going to serve essentially the same purpose. And like I said before, I actually I like to use a setup like this in pretty much all of my projects. It just makes coding a lot easier to do. Alright, so I'm going to actually open this up in Visual Studio. Now you're probably going to be using MonoDevelop, which is completely fine. I just use Visual Studio as my IDE because I find it a little bit easier to work with and just less buggy, I guess you could say. Okay, so I have it opened up here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up this region. So all of the scripts that you have in your project folder should have regions set up. And this one, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using a namespace, and we're going to set up static classes within the static constants region. Now if you have anything else that you would consider to be global functionality, such as enumerations or structures or anything like that, you can definitely put that in this global script as well, and just put it within the globals namespace, and you can use it globally that way. Alright, so before we get started on this, there is a couple of things that I want to do. I'm going to come over into Unity, and I'm going to go into Edit and Project Settings, and I'm going to go into the Input. So yeah, this Edit Project Settings Input. And I'm going to open up the axes here, and we can see that we have all of these pre-configured input axes. I'm going to add at least one more, and it's going to copy this cancel one down here, but I'm going to call it run, and I'm going to give it the positive button of left shift, and we're not going to need an alternate positive button, I don't believe, so I'm just going to delete that, and there we go. So now we have pretty much everything that we need. I'm going to come back into Unity, and I'm just going to actually create a public static class. So public static class, and I'm going to call this player input. And the reason that I do this is just because it's going to be a lot easier to access all of your input strings and everything without error if you just keep static references to it. So all we're going to do is just set up some static strings. So I'm going to say public static string, and I'm going to call this horizontal. And essentially we're just making all of these names correspond to the actual input axes here. So we have one called horizontal, and I can just copy that, and we'll put this into a string and just end that with a semicolon. And we're going to do the exact same thing for all of our input axes. So I actually have a list pre-written out here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this all in, and paste that. And what I really want to do is I just want to tab all of the equal signs over to make it a little bit better aligned. And you can definitely pause the video and copy all of these down, or if you have different input axes, then just put your own input axes in there. And I keep hitting tab twice, so I really don't need to do that, but I will down here. Alright, so now we actually have references to all of our inputs, and we're also going to do the exact same thing with our animator layers and conditions. So I'm going to come back into Unity and let this compile, and we'll come over into our animator, and again we can see we have these three layers, which are base layer, upper body, and lower body. And we also have all of these parameters, which are just well, they're floats, and then we have one bool, but we're going to be referencing them by string, so we can do the exact same thing in their own respective classes. And so I'm going to make a public static class, and I'm going to call this animator condition, and I'm going to give it some public static strings, and those will be, well, we don't have a walk, those will be the actual variables within here. So we have speed, direction, grounded, and air velocity. So I'm just, well, my computer will keep up with me, I'm going to copy the speed string, and I'm going to make that equal to speed, like that. And I also have a public static string direction, which is equal to direction, and a public static string grounded, which is equal to grounded, and public static string air velocity, which is going to be equal to air velocity. And we'll just copy that in right there. And again, I'm going to line up my equal signs, and it's just a little obsessive habit that I've gotten into. And we also have to do the layers, so I'm going to make a public static class animator layer, and we'll just do public static integer because we're going to be referencing the layers by their integer. So I'm going to take a look at our animator controller, and this base layer, you can access it by string, but it's actually a roundabout way in how you do it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to reference them directly by their integers. So base layer would be 0, just like in an array, and upper body will be 1, and lower body will be 2. And so if you add any more layers or take any layers away, just keep in mind that your base layer is always going to be 0, and it's going to increment by 1 going down in that convention. So we'll make a static string, or static integer, and we'll call that base layer, which is going to be equal to 0, public static int, and that's going to be upper body, which is going to be equal to 1, public static integer, which is going to be lower body, and that's going to be equal to 2. And that's pretty much it for our globals there. So it's going to be a lot easier to actually code this when we do get going. So this has been kind of a short video, but we will continue on in the next one, probably with our camera or our controller, and we'll just get things rolling from there. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.